Today, I'd like to welcome Sarah Villafranco, the founder of Osmia Skincare, to the show. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Would you mind starting off just sharing a little bit about Osmia?
Yeah, so we are a natural skincare brand based outside of Aspen, Colorado, and our mission is really just healthier, happier skin. We try to use sort of nature's simplest, most powerful ingredients to get great results for people, even with pretty tricky skin conditions like dermatitis, eczema, and acne. I spent in my previous career 10 years as an emergency room physician, and I think that education, training, and practice sort of allowed me to get this really cool perspective on health and wellness and how we can participate in our own health in sort of a joyful way. And that's really what we try to do with the brand.
So, starting off with Osmia Skincare, have you always been soaps and lotions and all of it? Or did it start off? How did it start off?
Um, I tend to be like an all or nothing kind of girl. And so I started the company after really, I took a class making soap, and so that was the first thing I learned to do. And it was right after my mom died and my second daughter was born. So I was in this like grief hormone perfect storm situation. And I'd been practicing for 10 years, and I felt I loved medicine. I still love medicine, but I felt like I was working in a pretty broken system. And I was sort of having to do a lot of things that didn't make all that much sense to me. Um, and so I like needed to do something different just to shake up my brain and have some creative outlet. And so I took a class making soap. And then that was, I mean, it was like instant brain chemistry switch for me, where I loved the hard science of soap making. Like, if you don't get the chemistry right, you end up with what I like to call not soap. Um, and so that chemistry is sort of non-negotiable, and I love that piece of it. But then there's so much artistry to be woven into soap, and it can be so much more than a mundane thing that you use in your shower. So then once I kind of dialed in the soap making and got to where I had a bunch of soap things that I loved, at that point I was deep into the research about ingredients, and really pretty stunned at what I was finding about the stuff we're using on our skin every day. So then I was thought, well, I'm not going to launch a brand until I can kind of cover someone head to toe in healthy ingredients. And so by the time we launched, and by the way, I do not recommend this for anybody starting a brand. I had like 30 SKUs when I launched, and it was
Wow.
bananas. I mean, it's crazy to try to grow a brand. We have 50 something now. I mean, it's nuts. We're actually like starting to pull some SKUs back because it's too hard to support such a broad distribution, especially because we make most of the products ourselves. So it's just, yeah, I recommend starting smaller than I did. But yes, I started the whole thing.
So while you were, well, first of all, you brought up two pieces of this conversation that I very much like to get into, over the course of this episode. One of those being elevating beyond the mundane, and then the second one being the ingredients. And so maybe we'll start out with the ingredients piece of what were you finding that people, that are in all of these mass-produced lotions?
Yeah. So a couple of things, like there's a lot of fear mongering going on out there. And I want to say at the
Yes.
start that I'm not really interested in that because, I didn't start the brand to take advantage of a bunch of like buzzwords and start throwing the word non-toxic around and not know what it means, right? So I dug in really hard early days to figure out where there was science, right? Or emerging science. And so if you look on our packaging, don't see one of our boxes right here, but if you look on our packaging, you'll see something called the tox screen. And I use that term because it's a term we used in the emergency room. So someone comes in, they're sort of non-communicative or seem to be intoxicated in one way or another. We don't know what's in their system. We run what's called a tox screen, right? And that tells us, do they have benzodiazepines? Do they have opiates? Do they have, marijuana? Do they have alcohol? Like, what do they have in their system? And we kind of know what we're working with. I took it on our packaging to be like, here are the things you're not going to find in our products, just so that it's like a quick, like, let me scan this. Okay. And there's like, I think there's 7 ingredients there. So these are the ones that I chose. I chose parabens, phthalates, petrochemicals, ethoxylated ingredients, synthetic fragrance, synthetic color, and sulfates. So those are the 7 things. Now, the places that after 10 years of being in this business now, the places that I think I see the most compelling evidence, either in scientific studies or in my observation, which I count because it's 10 years of observing people with skin issues now. The places that I think are the most important are parabens from a scientific standpoint, and ethoxylates from an environmental standpoint, right, and sulfates from a skin irritation standpoint, and synthetic fragrance as well from the irritation, both skin irritation and just general systemic irritation. Those are sort of the things where I'm like, okay, your eczema is not getting better until you get rid of synthetic fragrance and sodium lauryl, sodium lauryl sulfate. It's just not going to happen. Like, it might get a little better, but as long as you are continuing to assault it on a daily basis by wearing clothing that you've washed in Tide, it's not going away.
Yeah. And I love what you just said about that, because I think in my own health journey, it was tackling these little pieces. It was doing all of the glamour work without necessarily getting to the core of the issue. So I really love that you mentioned that. I think just anyone listening, the ingredient that or the class of ingredients that you just listed that maybe they're not as familiar with would be ethoxylates.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, it's such a dorky, like, scientific word, but it's essentially anything that has been ethoxylated. And what basically, you have a skincare ingredient. Let's say it's something that, a really, really common one is phenoxyethanol. So phenoxyethanol is a preservative that's very effective preservative. And I want to be clear, I think skincare, if it has a water component, must be preserved. I'm not an anti-preservative person because that's dangerous, right? It has to be preserved, but it can be done so with pretty healthy ingredients. And I'm also not saying phenoxyethanol is going to give you cancer. So I want to be clear about that too. But phenoxyethanol is an ethoxylated petrochemical. So it falls out of our formulas for those 2 reasons, not so much because there's been a ton of sort of scientific evidence showing that it causes disease in humans particularly. But to your question about ethoxylates, it's just it's been treated, whatever the ingredient is, it's been treated with ethylene oxide, which is, by the way, a carcinogen. The process of ethoxylation causes essentially a byproduct of something called 1,4-dioxane. And 1,4-dioxane is a contaminant in most water sources, most groundwater at this point. And it has it's maybe a carcinogen and definitely a mutagen, meaning it causes mutations in smaller species like fish and frogs and stuff. And I kind of really care about the little creatures we share the earth with. And so that's really the reason that we don't use it, is just because of the environmental contamination aspect of ethoxylation.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
And I also feel like in addition to those that you listed, the brand itself goes beyond that in assessing ingredients just for their bioaccumulation as well. And for instance, here I'm thinking specifically about EDTA.
Yeah, it never, there are certain things that like didn't even come into my thinking to use. right? Like, so there's
Yeah.
some stuff that's like not in our talk screen that, you know, that isn't shown on our packaging, but that just didn't even occur to me to use because I was like, like why would I? There's, you know,
Yeah.
there's just so many better options out there.
Yeah.
So, like silicones, that type of stuff,
Right.
like I don't feel the need to use them. And so, yeah, there is a whole lot of ingredients that we leave behind, but, you know, not more just because I didn't really have interest in them.
Okay.
And I mean, and yes, I'm sure that I didn't find the evidence to be like, so the 7 that I chose, I had like hard studies that kind of made me
Right.
feel like this is a, you know, non-negotiable. The other stuff was more like junk food. I was like,
Yeah.
why would I put it, like, that does nothing for me, does nothing for the formulation, does nothing for your skin. Why would I put it in?
Yeah. Ah, yes. And so the equating your skincare products to diet. This is actually one of the things that I love to do. And I love that parallel that you just drew there by, equating silicones to junk food. It's quite a beautiful analogy.
It's a simple analogy. I mean, it's a car. You put junky fuel in, you're going to get junky performance. And it happens with your nutrition and it happens with your skin too.
Yeah. So one of the kind of expanding beyond, because one of the things that Osmia Skincare is known for is helping people with perioral dermatitis. And
At
could we
10 times
maybe
fast. Such a mouthful.
Yes, it is. Can we maybe talk about your passion for, I mean, it spans beyond perioral oral dermatitis.
The
However,
edges.
it's just the fact that, that is definitely one that you have so much literature on your website and like so much passion for, and this shows up in social media and other places as well. So let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Sure. And you know, the reason I'm passionate, one of the reasons I'm passionate is because I have it. Right. So of course, like a lot of skincare brand founders, they're trying to solve a problem for themselves. Ultimately, we're all selfish and vain to some degree. And, you know, I mean, I hated having this situation on my face that just made me feel so uncomfortable. And yes, it's, you know, first world problems or whatever you want to call it. But the fact is, if you're interacting with people every day with a skin condition that's really, really noticeable, and you can tell people are kind of looking away or trying not to look at that part of your face or what, it just undermines your sense of who you are. And you start to redefine yourself in a way that doesn't feel true. And that's why I really like identify with people who are struggling with this condition. So the truth of how I got onto making mine go away was that it was a bit of an accident. I was out to make a beautiful bar of black soap. That's like, I remember growing up and my friend Stacy's mom, who was this super posh woman who had that cool gray streak in her hair, and she smoked like the really long cigarettes, and she just was like this, I don't know, really interesting character. She used to use this bar of soap by Erno Laszlo. Do you remember that bar?
No.
It's like a $47 bar of soap, but it's pitch black. And by the way, filled with a lot of ingredients that I would not use in a bar of soap. But I always loved that it was sort of sexy. And I was like, I want to make a cool, sexy bar of black soap. And so I did. And I made our black clay facial soap. And I started using it and saw my dermatitis start to settle down for the first time in years, despite having tried truly, I mean, the whole straight up Western derm route and the, you
Yeah.
know, putting olive oil and powdered sugar on I tried everything. And so when I saw my dermatitis start to go away, I was like, oh, is it the soap? So I stopped and it came back, started, and it went away again. And then I realized like, okay, there's a cause and effect here. And then I started just passing out chips of black clay facial soap to random people on the street. I was like, hi, do you see that redness around your nose and your smile lines? That's called perioral dermatitis. Would you like to try this bar of soap that I formulated? And just kept getting more and more feedback from people who were like, wow, this is actually helping. And if you look on our, you know, our site now, there's like over 1,000 reviews of that one little bar. from people who have really seen a difference in their skin. Why does it work? Probably Dead Sea mud is my guess. It's hugely rich in minerals and in sulfur. And sulfur is both anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial. And I think it just takes things down a notch. So when I figured that out, then I thought, okay, well, I had been testing every like oil known to the planet on my face because I wanted to know exactly how each one sat on your skin and how it penetrated and how long it lasted, and kind of, you know, be able to really understand how these oils felt so that I could use them in combination in a way that made a lot of sense. But it turns out PD does not like oils at all. And so I realized the more water-based things I was using on my skin, the happier my skin got. And that's when I developed Purely Simple Face Cream as a, you know, sort of, it's not water, but it's aloe, which is water soluble, as the main ingredient. It has a lower percentage of oils than most creams have. And so that's why that product seems to help dermatitis in a lot of cases as well. So, and then, like I said, I mean, you have to make other lifestyle changes. And that's the piece that's sometimes really hard to get people onto, especially if they don't have much of an interest in natural stuff, right? Like if they're full on, I love chemicals, I'll put gas on my face if you tell me it will make me look younger. Like and sometimes those folks end up with PD too, and they don't want to give up their laundry detergent or their perfume or their shampoo and conditioner. And I'm like, you have to make all of the changes if you want to not struggle with this for the next 2 decades of your life. Like if you want it not to come back every single time it has an opportunity to.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kind of switch gears and talk about the word osmia.
Yeah. Also a nerdy medical reference. And it was pre-COVID. I started the company in 2012. And I was looking for something that, you know, was a word that was sort of nice to say and was a little different. And I was looking through medical words and I came across the word anosmia, which is the inability to smell. And people know that now because of COVID. If you're pregnant, you often have hyperosmia, where you can smell things from a mile away. Sometimes certain brain conditions can cause a situation called parosmia, which is an altered sense of smell, where you smell like truck fumes or cigarettes or something. But there wasn't a word that was just osmia. The only place it existed is as a genus of bee. So there are osmia bees, which if you have time to Google osmia bee nests, they create their nests out of flower petals, and they're the most beautiful pieces of art you'll ever see in the animal kingdom. It's so cool. Anyway, but that's what it means, is really like, I wanted it to mean a sense of smell because I was very invested in the smell component of a lot of our products. And I also wanted it to pull back a step and mean a sense of your life, and just like let our products remind you to drop in and just be in that moment for a second, and then go to feed the dog and get to work and deal with screaming kids and whatever. But like, if you can take that 1 second to be and be there for yourself, great.
This is the first time I heard about the bees, Sarah. I think this just adds a whole nother layer to that word for your brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So, okay, speaking of osmia, what you just said, that was profound. Like, I'm over here about ready to cry, quite honestly. That was beautiful. And with the Osmia products, because that fragrance is such a signature of the brand. And here, when we're talking fragrance, of course, we're talking those essential oil blends and this aromatherapeutic part of the brand. I mean, really from Osmia's all the way from your seasonal limited edition, whether this is whatever that looks like, whatever form it takes, whether it's the soaps, your craft series, whatever. How, I guess, what inspired you to really start those craft series?
I think it's just a celebration of the seasons. I live in a place where we have 4 seasons. Granted, the winter is the longest of all of them, but we have 4 seasons, and I'm pretty tapped into the smells that go along with each. I always have been, right? Like that petrichor after a summer rain, or the smell of earth as it's coming out from under snow. In the last 3 days, I've watched snow melt and crocuses bloom on our property, and it's about to dump some more snow, so I feel bad for the crocuses. But those things, the sense of smell, that sort of it connects us so instantly to things, right? And like here's yet another nerdy medical thing. So your olfactory nerve, which is the nerve with which you smell, is the only one of our 12 cranial nerves that is actually exposed to the external environment. So inside your nose, there's something called the cribriform plate, and the nerve endings of the olfactory nerve stick down through this plate, and they actually contact the air. And there are no other cranial nerves that do that. And the way I think of it is it's sort of like, it's like the expressway into your brain. So these, the receptors at the end of the olfactory nerve come in contact with these aroma molecules, and they get on the HOV lane, and they just zoom right into, the sort of emotion and memory zones of your brain, which are very tied also into sort of what, like, lizard brain primal stuff, right? And that's why, like, you can walk into a room and all of a sudden be thinking about your grandmother and not know why, and then eventually someone like hands you something, and that is like, or you see a stack of fresh cedar wood, and you realize that cedar smell was your grandmother's closet, and you didn't even know what was going on. It happened so fast that you were just remembering your grandmother and you weren't sure why. Right. And so the power of that was always really clear to me. And so then I also, like, I have my own memory of my childhood. My mom was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and she was a partner in a law firm at a time when they did not make accommodations for women to become partners. And so, she's trying to have babies and be a partner, and just working incessantly and so hard. And I didn't see her that much as a kid, but when she was home, I'd sit like in the bathroom while she was doing her routine. And I remember her using Clarins facial oils, which, contain a lot of ingredients now that I wouldn't use, but back then was sort of more on the natural side and actually did use some essential oils. And I remember seeing her slow down. Like, I could see she would start her routine, and then when she would smell, I could see her just stop and like inhale and slow everything down as she would put these oils on her face. And I saw that, the power of that as well. So I think that's why my fascination with scent, wove itself into our formulas, although we also have a lot of unscented products for people who are super sensitive and just can't handle any smell, which is a thing.
Yeah. Well, there are so many directions that I want to take this. In the interest of time, just maybe kind of pulling back for a second. Actually, I want to ask one more question about the aromatherapy piece of it. Because you have spent quite a bit of time researching all of these different smells and how they impact the body. I mean, you talk about Dr. Robert Tisserand and some other, like, renowned people within the aromatherapy space. So let's talk about that just a little bit in more detail for a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few years back, and I posted a reel on our Instagram about this, I don't know, a year or two ago. There was an article in the New York Times that said something like, "Are essential oils in skincare killing your skin?" or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, and it was about people using products with essential oils and having really terrible skin reactions, which can happen, right? But like reading about the specific products, like one was like a peppermint face mask, and I'm like,
Oh, well,
who's
yeah,
mint on your face? Who? I want to know, right? And
yeah,
another one was, I can't remember what it was, somebody who I can't remember what the examples were, but there were like 2 or 3 examples where in this article, I'm like, well, okay, essential oils are medicine. And if you want to use them willy-nilly and just put a bunch of crap in a formula because it smells good together, yeah, there are going to be consequences. And so, I think using them properly and in the right concentrations and combinations, they're super powerful and potentially really helpful. And are there still people who can't tolerate them? Yes, absolutely, there are. But I think it's really, really important to educate yourself. A lot of these essential oils have dermal maximums, which, I mean, that's Tisserand's book right there, Essential
okay,
Oil Safety. I look, every time I create a craft series, every time I create anything, I'm looking at dermal maximums, and I'm looking at safety in pregnancy, and I'm looking at any other, there's a couple where if you have a history of a seizure disorder, you really shouldn't be using this essential oil, et cetera. So, I mean, it's really important to look that stuff up and to know it. And so, yeah, I think that's a piece about a lot of the smaller brands started by people who don't have a scientific background and who are really passionate about plants, and that's a beautiful thing. But you have to be a scientist when it comes to skincare formulations, because you can cause a lot of trouble for people.
yeah. And thank you for bringing up pregnancy, because that was something else that I wanted to talk about. So this is something else that Osmia Skincare does a great job of listing out which essential oils are safe for use during pregnancy. You have several blog posts on this, and it's something that you talk about. And then in addition, you mentioned that you have entire fragrance-free lines for people who are sensitive to smells for any reason.
Right.
For the pregnancy piece of it, by by the time you started Osmia, you'd already had both of your daughters. Was it
Yeah.
something that you started for any of your friends, someone that worked at Osmia, or just with the knowing that this is what pregnant women are going to be interested in?
Yeah, and not only that, I know that after you've had a baby, you want to be careful about what you're using, especially if you're going to have a lot of, which hopefully you are going to have a lot of contact with the baby. Babies' systems are pretty like labile and fragile for 6 to 12 months. So they really shouldn't have any essential oils in their lives for that first year-ish. Some people start, after 6 months, but I think it's really important to be able to have products that moms can use on themselves and use on their babies and just not worry about it, because there's it's enough during that time. It's enough to worry about. It's enough to try to sleep.
Yeah.
And is your milk coming in, and is the baby pooping? And I mean, it's like enough. You shouldn't have to think about what you're putting on your skin. And the stuff they send you home from the hospital with is like, I just can't believe we're still sending people home with that stuff. It's like shocking to me, but it's a little behind the times.
Yeah, maybe we'll catch up. Okay. Is there any, let's see, so we talked about pregnancy and postpartum. And so, yeah, it sounds like during that postpartum period, it's best to avoid any kind of essential oil at all.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you, let's say you are in a good pattern and you put the baby to bed and you want to take a shower and you want to put some night body oil or something with a little bit of lavender and help you sleep through the night, you're probably fine by the morning to nurse again and that kind of stuff. I think you got to weave a little common sense into it. There's no hard science on any of it. And even within the essential oil expert community, there is disagreement, right? So like a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner might say something different than an aromatherapist, might say something different than Robert Tisserand, right? And so that I tried in our blog post about essential oils during pregnancy, I tried to like synthesize the how can I bring this all into one point of view? Because it's a little tricky. But there are a few essential oils like pennyroyal and birch that just should not be used by pregnancy or by pregnant people ever for any reason, because of the chance of it causing a miscarriage or loss of the pregnancy. And so, but they're so few, and the rest of it is kind of like just doing the best we can with the information we have. So, I guess I say, if you want to err on the side of safety and not worry about anything, then, 6 months to a year of no scent in your products. And that's going to include your hair care and your laundry detergent. Please, 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 everybody change your laundry detergent, and not just to something or other free and clear, right? Let's change it to something that doesn't have SLS in it also. So you got to get rid of the fragrance and the SLS so your little baby doesn't have eczema and all kinds of dermatitis and little rashes.
Okay. As we start to wrap up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
I sort of was looking a little over your background, and it's I guess I would ask you, how do you stay hopeful? Because like within my own little echo chamber, like, our 45,000 followers on Instagram and our, loyal customer base who all like are signed up to use healthier ingredients and save the planet and help themselves get out of their skin condition, whatever it is, and they're willing to like invest financially, emotionally, energetically in making changes. But then like it's like you take one lap through any major airport and you're assaulted with so many synthetic scents and so people with just such an array of people using products that are just so terrible for the world and their health. And sometimes like after 10 years in the industry, like I'm still here with my little megaphone, like, trying to spread the word, but it's like sometimes it feels really hard to make change and to get people on board to help themselves. So I guess I'm asking you how you stay hopeful about that, and if you have any, and because you work in a world that is linked to chemicals, right? And so, yeah, any thoughts you could share about how we continue to share education and create meaningful change in a way that feels positive and good to people?
Oh, that's a great question, Sarah. So I think part of it is, yes, my day job is in pharma, and I myself have had this incredible, just looking back over the history of my life, I've had my own incredible transformation from where I started as very much reliant on Western medicine from the get-go, like from birth. My mom had to have a C-section. The umbilical was wrapped around my neck twice. So I was very, very reliant on Western medicine for the first, I would say, 4 decades of my life, and very much let myself be gaslighted by what Western medicine can provide. And here, I'm not saying that Western medicine should be thrown out with the bathwater.
Mhm.
But there's also this huge divide between where Western science is, which is so much farther ahead than Western medicine, and where Western medicine is. And then there's also all of the money that comes into play. But what keeps me hopeful is grassroots movements. It's people like Mike Gaskins, who wrote In the Name of the Pill, just talking about the dangers of birth control and really bringing that to light. And it's looking back and thinking about where I was and where I am now, in my own life, and having that as something that I can really connect to and say, it's like I have had my own awakening. And I think that awakening is possible for each and every person on the planet. And it looks very different for every single one of us. I know my sister is still in the throes of sleep. I feel she's very much anesthetized now. To what to just where we are, what this sea of chemicals is doing to our bodies and to our environment and to our world, but then just also connecting with other people and seeing the path that other people have blazed, the path of their own awakening. I think it keeps me hopeful.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not walking around like Eeyore, saying there's no, but like once in a while, I just get surprised where I'm like, wow, like I said, with the, a friend of mine came home from the hospital and had a baby, and she had I'm not going to drop brand names, but she had like this baby wash. And I just was like, I can't, like, really? I'm so like, wow. And so sometimes I just get caught off guard by the ways in which we have stayed the same. But I'll keep singing my song, and hope I think it's just hard, like as a small brand that doesn't have like a ton of funding, to feel like you can move the needle. And it's such an important needle to move. And I'm so grateful for people who are out there, in all areas, Mark Hyman and, Casey Means, and like all these people who are sort of calling medicine out for like, wait, guys, it really doesn't make sense how we practice, which is why I left the ER, right? Because I was like, this doesn't actually make a lot of sense. We're not talking to people about what they're eating. We're not talking to them about how they're managing stress. We're not talking to them about getting outside and moving. Like, this is literally the fundamental building blocks of human health, and the absence of those things will result in disease. Period. End of story. And so how are we not talking about it? And like, I got more and more frustrated with that, which is why I left. So I feel like there is a movement happening, at least in medicine, but I feel like the skincare piece is kind of like a sad little hitchhiker, along for the ride. And I'm hoping we can stay along for the ride, and that the general awareness that's growing about, nutrition will kind of naturally fall into place for people when it comes to skincare as well. Because ingredients are ingredients, whether they're in or on. So yeah, I think there are good things happening, but it does sometimes feel like you're sort of yelling into the void, and that can be frustrating. Especially, I guess the other piece that's frustrating is just when brands come in and do the whole greenwashy thing.
Right.
We are so clean, and we're non-toxic, and we're this and we're that, and I'm over here going like, sorry, you're not, though. Like, you're not, you're actually just lying. And that's really frustrating for a small brand that's like been really trying to do things right and tell the truth from day one. And so that kind of stuff, like, whatever, that's just the way of the world. I get it. But sometimes it's a bummer.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think what you mentioned with the nutrition piece, and you're hoping skincare will tag along. For me, I had the exact opposite story. For me, it's always been the skincare first. And then it's what you said earlier in the conversation. It's not just your skincare. It's not just your diet. It's everything that's going into your body. So it was me taking a hard look at, oh yeah, but I'm still taking hormonal birth control. Like, could that be causing some of my problems?
Mhm.
And it's this huge piece, but it took all of these other things. It took all of these other changes. It took all of this other, like, it was it was an evolution of the mind. It wasn't just waking up one day and being like, okay, it's all clean and my life's great now, or or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Yeah. Evolution
Um,
is a good word for it.
yeah. There was something else as you were talking that I thought about, but it's escaped me already. So
Yeah. Well, welcome to my perimenopausal brain. That's the normal way. It'll come back. You can email me.
all right. How can people connect with you?
Um, our website, which is osmiaskincare.com, and that's our handle on all social platforms, Osmia Skincare. So you can
Okay.
find it in those places.
Okay. Well,
Awesome.
thank you so much for your time, Sarah.
Thanks, Brandy. I appreciate it. And it was nice to chat with you in person instead of just seeing you on TikTok.
Yeah, same here. It was very nice to talk with you in person instead of watching IG stories.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.